Good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to this year's Remembrance Day service. Today we are celebrating the 27th time that a Remembrance Day service has been held here on the site of the former Kinkaseki POW camp. We want to specially honor and remember the former prisoners of war who were held here and in other camps around Taiwan, and also all the veterans of all the conflicts of the past 123 years. To the veterans here with us this morning, we thank you for your service. Lastly, we remember too those who are still serving today. We think of them on this day. Now I would like to ask the Reverend Dr. Herbert Barker, our chaplain, to lead us in an opening prayer for our ceremony this morning. Reverend.
Let us pray. Eternal God, grant us the courage to embrace prisoners of war as our own, as your divine nature embraces all of us. May we share their journey of hope for deliverance, for you heard their cry and their distress, and you rescued them from their despair. They walked in mountains and in pits of death. They found comfort in the tender care of their mates. They trusted in your promise to bring them home, where they would dwell with you in the house of the Lord forever. Lead us in the ways of peace. O Lord, as we walk anew in cities of death, among the dead and the dying, deliver us from warring madness. O Lord our God, we are grateful for your everlasting mercy and forgiveness. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend. Now I would like to call on Jim Nickel, Executive Director of the Canadian Trade Office in Taipei, and our co-host for this year's event, to address us.
Reverend Dr. Herbert Barker, General Feng Shi Kwan, Minister of Veterans Affairs Council, General Yao Rongxin, Veterans Association, POW family members from the United Kingdom, ladies and gentlemen, 各位贵宾，今天跟每天一样，每一天我们都应该要记住那些为了我们的自由而赴战斗和实行的人。Today, as we should every day, we remember those who volunteered, sacrificed, served, fought, and died for our freedom. In no place were basic freedoms and human dignity more cruelly and violently taken than in prisoner of war camps like the one here in Kinkaseki, where we now stand. The act of remembrance keeps alive the flame of hope that the loss we gather to remember was not in vain, and importantly, to honor those who gave so much for our freedom. We have a shared responsibility to keep this flame burning. For those of us who stand free, free to choose, free to speak, free to be whom we want to be, it is imperative we understand that the gift of freedom is not to be taken for granted, nor should we be complacent in its preservation. We also know, sadly, that there are people in our world today who do not enjoy the freedoms and rights we enjoy. Mankind's history is marked by conflict. Freedom, peace, and stability continue to be challenges for our world today. In a world where conflicts still rage, where geopolitical changes are causing uncertainty, democratic societies must never be complacent. We must continue to strive for peace and partnership. We must strive for dialogue and understanding. We must strive to secure relationships built on trust and understanding. Otherwise, We squander the sacrifices made by those we commemorate today, and we fail to understand and apply the lessons of history. We owe those we commemorate today that much, but we also owe it to the generations to come to leave them a better world. That is why we gather here today. That is why we remember them today, lest we forget.
Thank you, Jim. The ROC Veteran Affairs Council has contributed to our Remembrance Day services for more than 20 years. We are very grateful for your support. We are honored to once again have with us the Minister, General Retired Feng Xuquan, present with us, and we would now like to ask him to say a few words. General.
Michael, distinguished guests, I don't want to use my draft to say a few words, but I want to say something from my heart. The peace is priceless. You can see nowadays, not only the Russian and the Ukraine have war, also the Israel and the Palestine, they have big trouble and conflict. But in Taiwan, we have long time threatened by the mainland China. When we can have freedom and democracy living together, let the people exchange freely, talking freely. I wish this world, the God will be mercy to take care of us. Finally, I want to say, whenever I come here, this is my first time. I always talking with the residents of here. Their grandma and grandfather like to told me about the story about this. So I feel so angry about why they have these POW camps in Taiwan. Why is not in other country? Finally, I want to say, I do respect those young men or even generals have sacrificed their lives for what? For service their country, for release the unfaithful and faithful the other country to give them the pressure and any, I would say the other. I feel a little emotional to say these words. I wish all the young men have been here understand. I remember him. Taiwan people will remember him. Whole world will remember him. Remember them, service the country and sacrifice their lives. Wish all the distinguished guests good health and continued success. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. We are also honored to have with us this morning retired Air Force General Liao Rongxin, former Vice Chief of General Staff, Ministry of National Defense, with us today. He is representing the Veterans Association of the Republic of China. We now invite him to share some thoughts with us this morning. General Liao. Thank you.
Ambassador Michael, Minister Feng, representatives of all over two allies countries stationed in Taiwan, all the foreign veteran representatives, most importantly, all the over two POWs who are not with us today. And then, ladies and gentlemen, I wish you all have a peaceful and enjoyable day. First of all, I would like to express that it was my great honor to talk to you in this very meaningful and memorial event on behalf of ROC Veteran Association. Today, we come together here to pay our respect and remember all the POWs during World War II who were camped and died in Taiwan. Their suffering and sacrifice were all for protecting their countries and the people. They had done their duties, and they deserve our highest esteem. Looking back on our history, it is said you might not feel interested in the war, but war is deeply interested in you. Truly, as you all can see, war is now in everywhere. Albert Einstein also said, two things are infinite: the universal and the human. Stupidity and I'm not sure about the universe. As well, Alvin Toffler said in his book, War and Anti-War, in half a century after 1945, the year when the peace came, there were 150 to 160 wars or civil war erupted, and more than 7.2 million soldiers killed. He also calculated that there were only 3 warless weeks out of totally 2,340 weeks from 1945 to 1990. In the preamble of the book, he said, it is not incompatible between the war and the anti-war. The anti-war can be advocated by speech, prayers, demonstrations, protest, parade. Yet, more importantly, the anti-war is to end the war. The reality of war is complicated, and the war situation is also fickle. Sometimes war itself will also contain another bigger and more bloody war. So, when we were talking about the war to end the war itself is the anti-war. The highest level of the anti-war is to expert military, economy, and information means to prevent potential conflicts following by an unstable global political situation. Hence, in Tofuro's book, the military's roles is and the mission are clear, and it is an unshakable responsibility. Additionally, one of the most influential historians today, a professor of Jerusalem University, Naha Harari, delivered a speech last year on the subject of a divided world, the challenge after pandemic and the war. He took a macro historical perspective, bluntly analyzing the world situation, and warned us again and again not to underestimate the stupidity of the human being, which often casual conflict and the war and bring endless crises into the world. As we can see, the Ukraine war and the recent Israel-Hamas conflict, which have been causing huge civilian casualty, including lots of children and destroyed countless families. It is indeed a heartbroken tragedy, and we shall stop the killing ASAP. Lastly, I would like to conclude my talk by saying that human beings can learn lowliness and meekness only from historical cruelty and tragedies, and become selfless and greediness, which then make harmonious and peaceful coexistently possible. Hence, I would like to emphasize that there is no winners in a war, and there is no loser in peace. And I hope you all agree. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, General Liao. I will now ask Michael Hurst, Director of the Taiwan POW Camps Memorial Society, to speak about remembering. Michael.
Thanks, Mark. Well, this is one of our typical Kinkaseki rainy days, isn't it? For those of us who've been coming here for 25 or 26 years, you can count the rainy days a lot more than the sunny ones, but it's so wonderful for me as a director and the host along with our Canadian office this year to welcome everybody and to thank you for all coming out on such a miserable day. And I hope that when it's all over, that you'll find that your heart's been touched and that you've been blessed by being here and helping us to remember those soldiers and sailors and airmen who fought in this kind of weather all over the world in the last 100 years. And also the POWs who trudged daily to the mine in this camp in weather almost like this every day. Over the years, I've often thought what would have happened if we had lost World War II to Hitler and his henchmen, or if the Japanese had succeeded in overrunning all of the Far East. what a different world we would live in today. And what kind of life would we be living now? Or maybe we wouldn't be living at all. Not only would our entire way of life and system of freedom have been destroyed, many of our grandparents and parents would have been killed. So many of us would never have been born, and our children would not exist. This fate would have been met by virtually all other members of minority groups, religious groups, and the disabled. The personal freedoms that we take so much for granted would have disappeared. But thankfully, those men and women of what they call the greatest generation responded to the challenge and filled the need and went to war, and many gave their lives so that the forces of tyranny, the then axis of evil, would not, and thankfully did not, triumph. How do you thank someone enough for your existence and that of your children, and for all of the freedoms and opportunities that we all take so much for granted today? It's certain that we who follow on can never imagine what it was like to live during those 3.5 terrible years as prisoners of war of the Japanese. We can only spend the rest of our lives remembering them and honoring them and feeling very privileged to have known them as they came here to Taiwan to be with us for various Remembrance Days. Here in Taiwan, we want to tell the story of the former Taiwan and Far East prisoners of war to the world, and in so doing make sure those men and what they suffer, so that we can live in a free and democratic Taiwan with all its good life, are never forgotten. Time is getting short. The remaining World War II veterans are passing away in huge numbers every year, and soon they will be no longer be with us. As many of you know, the last former Taiwan POW passed away last year in April at the age of 100. The last Remembrance Day event for us to hear from one of the surviving former POWs took place in 2015 with the visit of Gunner Ken Pett, a POW who was in Kinkiseki and Kakutsu camps. That is why it is so urgent that we thank them now, before they're all gone, so they can live and depart in peace. Thankfully, this work was begun many years ago while many were still with us, and we have had an opportunity here in Taiwan in the past Remembrance services to meet and thank a number of them in person, all of who have sadly now passed away. There are over 4,350 names on our memorial wall. May I challenge you, maybe not today in this rain, to go and find a name on that wall, any name, maybe your family name, and think of how that man gave his all here as a prisoner of war and as a veteran fighting in Malaya or Singapore or the Philippines, and have a little prayer and thank that man for the freedom that you now have. Many people often say now, after such a passage of time, why should we keep up the traditions of Remembrance Day, Veterans Day, Anzac Day? I believe the answer is summed up in these 3 simple words, and why we will continue to do this for many years to come, lest we forget.
Thank you, Michael. Sadly, all of the former Taiwan prisoners of war have now passed on. But now that COVID, for the most part, has passed, we are happy once again to have with us families of former prisoners of war returning to Taiwan to follow in their relatives' footsteps and take part in our Remembrance Day events. This year, we are honored to have 4 POW family members from the United Kingdom attending Remembrance Day events with us. We bid them a very warm welcome to our service today. Laura Donnelly is remembering her great-grandfather, Signalman Sam Bagwell of the Royal Corps of Signals, who was interned in Hato, Kinkiseki, and Kakutsu camps. Steve Witt is the grandson of Sapper James Finley, Royal Engineers, who was held in Taichu Kinkaseki and Kukutsu Camp. Mandy Reese is the granddaughter of Gunner James Graham, 155th Field Regiment Royal Artillery, who was also held in Kinkaseki and Kukutsu camps. Her husband Phil accompanies her. Today, as always, we remember the POWs and all the veterans and the sacrifices they have made for our freedom. Now, in commemorating those former times of conflict, I would like to ask Vietnam-era veteran Wayne Yee to read A Time to Remember.
Thank you. Greetings to all my fellow veterans. As the day comes to close in the United States, today is Veterans Day. So we honor all the veterans that's here today. And there's something that I was requested to read. And it's so touching that I sent it back to the United States. Veterans Day. And it's very, very touching. A time to remember. All ex-POW and veterans have one common wish to pass along to future generations. Please, remember us. Remember those men who died in battle. Remember the men who marched day upon day without food or water. Remember the POW who were beaten when they were and killed when they didn't. Remember the men who wait to die in the Zero War. Remember the men who lost their life at sea when their hell ship was sunk. And remember the men who survived their 3.5-year ordeal. Certainly, we cannot even begin to appreciate the sacrifice that these veterans of different kind of war had made. They fought not in front lines, but behind enemy lines, with no weapons, but a strong will to survive. Not against an enemy at a distance, but with one face to face, under attack, without any way of defending themselves, without any option of retreat, without proper food, rest, or medication. We owe so much to those veterans who gave so much for their country, for their family, for us. Let us then, who enjoy the benefit of their sacrifice, do our best to honor these veterans and show our appreciation for what they have done for us. On this special day of remembrance, may they and all our veterans know that they have not and will not ever be forgotten, lest we forget. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. L. Abram from Taiwan VFW Post 9957 will now read What is a Veteran?
Thank you. Good morning. What is a veteran? He is an ordinary and yet extraordinary human being, a person who offered some of his life, most vital years in the service of his country, and who sacrificed his ambitions so others would not have to sacrifice theirs. He is a soldier and a savior and a sword against the darkness. He is a prisoner of war who went away one person and came back another, or didn't come back at all. So remember, each time you see someone who served their country, just lean over and say, thank you. Those two little words mean a lot to a veteran. Just say thank you. And remember, it is the veteran not the poet, who has given us freedom of speech. It is the veteran, not the reporter, who has given us freedom of the press. It is the veteran, not the preacher, who has given us freedom of religion. It is the veteran, not the campus organizer, who has given us the freedom of assembly and demonstrate. It is the veteran, not the lawyer, who has given us the right to a fair trial. It is the veteran, not the politician, who has given us the right to vote. It is the veteran who salutes the flag, serves beneath the flag, and whose coffin is draped by the flag, who has given the protesters the right to burn the flag. Remember, these men and women gave their all, and it is to them the world owes its freedom. Let us salute them and honor their heroism. Thank you.
Thank you, El.
Thank you.
The traditional verse usually read on Remembrance Day services is that written in World War I by Canadian doctor Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae from his medical aid station on the battlefields of Flanders. As he watched the poppies growing amid crosses in the cemetery near his dressing station, he penned the words of what is now undoubtedly the most famous Remembrance poem. I would like to ask Martin Leflam, Director of General Relations of the Canadian Trade Office, to read In Flanders Fields.
In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row and row that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead, short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe, to you from failing hands we throw the torch, be yours to hold it high. If you break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
Thank you, Martin. Steve Witt is now pleased to share some thoughts with us about his father and his visit to Taiwan for this year's Remembrance Day service.
My grandfather, Jim Findlay, was amongst the former prisoners of war taken to this island after the Allied surrender in Singapore as part of 3.5 years of imprisonment. He was initially held at the River Valley Camp Road in Singapore, River Valley Road Camp in Singapore, and then after being transported on the hill ship Dainichi Maru at Taichu, Hinkaseki and Kukutsu camps here in Taiwan. Finally, at war's end, he was taken to Manila on the USS Block Island for medical care and treatment before returning home. Like so many other men who endured what he had to endure, my grandfather did not speak about what happened to him here during his time as a prisoner of war. As a child, I only ever asked him once, and whilst he certainly wasn't angry with me, it was made very clear that the subject was not up for discussion. It is only now, years later, that I've learned more about what he experienced that I can understand why he did not want to speak about it. However, no matter how much he had been personally affected by what he went through, he did not allow it to impact his loving relationships with family members. When anyone reads or hears about the brutality and mistreatment the Allied prisoners of war suffered at the hands of many of the Japanese Imperial Army Guards and Taiwanese Hanchos at the copper mine, they cannot fail to be shocked. What the men had to endure here during the Second World War was quite unique, and the level of effort which has been undertaken by the Taiwan POW Camps Memorial Society to recognise that has been both astounding and heartwarming in equal measure. The aim of the society is to ensure that the story of the Taiwan POWs is more widely known, and that the efforts of the men and the hardships they endured are never forgotten. The various memorials across the island, and this memorial park with its bronze sculpture and the flame of peace and remembrance, are fitting and enduring tributes, and it gives me enormous pride to see the name of my grandfather, Sapper James Findlay, engraved on the POW memorial wall. Reference is often made to my grandfather's generation being the greatest generation, and when we sit here now as members of the generations that follow, look back and think about what he and his comrades suffered on this island, and how they somehow pulled together to endure it, and in some cases to survive it, not in every case, it is very difficult to argue with that description. My grandfather's son Bob and his wife Lorna, so my uncle and aunt, came here in 2016, and I'm delighted to have had the opportunity to travel here as another family member and part of the next generation to pay tribute to my grandfather and follow in his footsteps. He died in 1996, just around the time that the society first started to get set up in its initial form. And so whilst he himself never had the opportunity to see what has been done here since that time, I know he would appreciate it very much, and be delighted, if not a little surprised, such was his modesty, that members of his family would travel 6,000 miles in his honour. I will make sure that my own children understand what their great-grandfather did for their benefit, for everyone's benefit, and how much he sacrificed in doing it. To be able to remember my grandfather and speak about to him here in this place is deeply meaningful and very moving. Today, I pay tribute to him, his comrades who are here with him, and indeed to all those who have defended our freedoms and protected our way of life at this very special Remembrance Day service. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Mandy Reese will now bring the tribute to the POWs.
Tribute to the POWs. Their story must be told because their courage and their heroism were what led us on to victory. That victory was measured in their survival and in maintaining their faith and their loyalty to their country. When the reward for maintaining that loyalty was continued, starvation and for many, death. Their strong heart, great spirit, and unyielding faith serve as an inspiration to the rest of us. They placed honour before everything, even before their own well-being. They absorbed with their own bodies the blows that were intended by our enemies for our nations and our people. And they sacrificed their own freedom for the freedom of the world. Finally, they returned from their service, regained their rightful place in society, and strengthen their families, their communities and our nations through their example of courage, loyalty and continued good citizenship. We owe them a debt that can never be repaid. What they did must not and will not ever be forgotten. We will remember them.
Thank you, Mandy. Finally, Laura Donahue will read for us We Will Remember, which is our pledge to always remember those who served, those who fought, and those who died for our freedom that we enjoy today. Laura shows us how a new generation carries on the tradition to always remember those who served and died for our freedom. Laura.
Firstly, I would like to pay tribute to my great-grandfather, Robert Bagwell. It's been astounding to pull him from the history books after not knowing anything, and he has really come alive today being in this place. We will remember them. In the rising of the sun and its going down, we will remember them. In the blowing wind, in the chill of winter, we will remember them. In the opening buds and in the rebirth of spring, we will remember them. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we will remember them. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we will remember them. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we will remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we will remember them. When we are lost and sick of heart, we will remember them. When we have joys we yearn to share, we will remember them. So long as we live, they too shall live. For they are now part of us, as we will remember them.
Thank you, Laura. The Reverend Dr. Herbert Barker, himself a veteran who served in the Vietnam War era as a chaplain to the United States Armed Forces, is pastor of the Church of the Good Shepherd in Shilin, Taipei. He became our POW Society's chaplain in 2010 and has participated in remembrance events for the past 13 years. Reverend Barker will retire at the end of this month, and we want to thank him for his faithful service to us all, to the POWs, to the Society and their families. He will now deliver a message to us and offer a prayer of remembrance. Reverend.
Thank you. Well, he gave most of my speech. Michael Hurst, thank you for the honor and the privilege of being your honorary chaplain these 13 years. Although I've been here at every service during the 13 years, this is actually my 14th occasion. That was my first duty here after 3 weeks in country. And as was noted, this is a farewell to arms occasion for me. Farewell to arms to the good people in the Church of the Good Shepherd in Shirling. A farewell to them. A farewell to 60 years of being in ministry and almost 57 years of being a chaplain. In fact, it's been so long I thought my name was chaplain. And I referred at these occasions that because I was a chaplain so long, I understand soldiers and sailors and Marines and airmen. I understand warriors. And I understand that they don't fight for all the wonderful things that they won for us. The freedom, the democracy. They fight for their buddy, the person next to them. And as we read on the sculpture out there, no prisoner of war could survive without a mate. They demonstrated the deepest part of humanity. I never met a warrior that wanted to go to war. Every warrior that I've ever known wanted to go home, not to war. And as I say farewell, not only to my church and perhaps to the POW services, I recall exactly the mission that I had as a chaplain. It was crystal clear to me. That mission was simply not to be a cheerleader of war or an apologist for nationalism. My mission was to support and nurture humanity in warriors, to save their humanness, to keep them human, and to remind them that they see the enemy, humanity. This was my mission, and always has been. And the wonder is that the ones that I have known, and most of them kept their humanity. And as we come here today, and as we recognize the motto, no prisoner of war could survive without a mate, that demonstrates the deepest part of their humanity, the care and service to one another. So why do we come here to remember? To unite our humanity with theirs, to realize that they are brothers and fathers and uncles and neighbors. Their humanity is forever united with ours. That's why we come to remember. Remember their humanity, and if you remember today, and I know you will remember and salvage your own humanity. We shall remember that. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend. This part of the service is now concluded. We will now move outside for the laying of the wreaths. Michael will explain the wreath laying order.
Thanks, Mark. Thank you to all those who read and participated this morning. It was really, really great. And even though the weather isn't the best, I think we're a fairly bonded group here today, and that's really nice. Okay, so again, because of the rain, we've had to do some things a little differently. So I'm going to tell you the order that you're supposed to come up and to lay a wreath. And for example, if there's a whole group of people, like the veterans group or something, and you don't all want to get soaked, then maybe a couple of people from that group can come up and lay the wreath. But otherwise, we just carry on like other years and hope for the best. Can I have the wreath laying? Thanks. Just to make sure I don't... Hang on. Okay, so for the POWs, Mr. Chang Awe and Chang Yin-jia and Mr. Xie from the temple are going to lay the wreath for the prisoners of war. And then the veterans, the serving veterans, and then we will have the ROC veterans.
Get it.
Forward. Mark. Group. Halt. Freeze it. Hunt. Order. Hunt. Fall out.
好，鞠个躬啊！好，
在旁边。
回去好了啊。
You guys can come over here and line up along here. You all have umbrellas. Mateo will now play for us the last post, then we'll have a minute of silence. Following that, there will be the playing of rouse.
We will now read the Ode to Remembrance. Please will be joining me in the reading. They went with songs to the battle. They were young, straight and low, true and high,
steady in the glow. They were staunch to the end, and lost uncounted. They fell with their faces to the foe. They shall not grow old, and they that are left grow old. Age should not bury them, nor years condemn. And going down the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them.
This concludes our Remembrance Day service for this year. I sincerely hope that you have been moved by what you have seen and heard this morning. I would like to extend our thanks to all those who participated in this morning's service. Thank you all for coming and taking part in Remembrance Day, and for showing your support and for honoring the veterans and the fallen. We invite you to join us for lunch, which has been
His mother.
My mother.
Saw the prisoners at the camp yesterday. They were going to the farm and they were chained together.
And Japanese soldiers would bring them, they were chained to the bed, one by one, and then they... But the Taiwanese government is even brutal under the Japanese colony. They take the political prisoners, chain here and chain there.
Right, so they had the same treatment.
Yes,
the guards got the same treatment, yes.
That's what my mom told me. He saw like a teenager, less than a teenager. And that is Japan bombing all day. They're running around and then you see the prisoner have to go outside to the field to work.
Oh, I see. Wow. I didn't think they were chained together like that. No, thank you. Keep in touch, I have you. Yeah.
May I speak to you for a second? So I'm just recording something for the association and might go out on social media.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's fine.
The lady just like he gave me.
Oh, he gave you.
Okay, so can you just tell me, you can talk to me directly, right? So, who are you and why are you here?
So, my name's Laura Donaghy and my great-grandfather, Signalman Robert Bagwell, was interned here at Kinkaseki. He arrived exactly 80 years ago today, 12th of November 1943. From what we understand, he spent most of his time as a prisoner of war here. He eventually went over to another camp. For a long time we knew nothing. We assumed that he was in Burma because he never spoke about it to his son, my mother, his granddaughter. He never spoke to it. In 2016 I happened across Michael's website, the POW Taiwan website, and his name just pops up, like with his rank, everything, nothing that we've known for decades. So I used to work abroad, so I've not had a chance to come until now, but now that I have, it's come from the history books, so to speak. And
so what have you found here?
Well, he's become a real man. I know it sounds very odd to say, but he's become real, because he was just a black and white photograph, he was just a name before this. So to hear what they've gone through. He's just become very real in that sense of the word. As if I'd met him. Yeah.
Whereabouts are you from?
Preston in Lancashire, which is the northwest of England. Yeah.
I'm an affiliated research fellow for the University of Central Lancashire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I graduated from UCLan. Yes. Yeah, there we go.
Oh, well, indeed.
Yes,
right?
very good.
Yeah. So he was a Lancashire man?
He was a Lancashire man through and through from Preston, yeah, born and bred. He went back there after the war. He arrived in Liverpool in October 1943 on the SS Empress of Australia. My grandmother and my grandfather, his son, arrived to meet him, and they didn't recognise him when he came up to them. He was 6.5 stone when he arrived. I've been to Pierhead, the memorial where the ships came in, so it's very odd to be down to the port where they left for Liverpool, so it's both sides of it now. And my mother was the last person to know him. When she was about 7, he died, and he said he could never stand to see anybody not finish a meal. He was quite stern, but at the same time there's a lot of photographs of him at the beach with my uncle, and later on my mother playing at the beach smiling. He always had this very contagious smile that was inherited by my grandfather, that I saw in my grandfather. So it didn't affect him in the sense that it made him a mean man. And I said this to my mother the other night. I said, even if he was a mean man, he can be forgiven for being so, purely because of what he went through. Yeah.
So do you know what regiment was he with?
I think he was with the 12th Indian Brigade, part of the Royal Signal Corps. Yes.
And was he taken a prisoner in Singapore?
In Singapore, which was not in Malaya. We have got his capture record on file as well, yeah, but it should have been around February 1942.
Who maintains those records? Who put them together in the first place? Was it his regiment? Or?
No, so that particular record I just found online, maybe it's Ancestry or something like that. The rest of it, I've got a picture of him in Singapore before his capture. That's come from a cousin, his granddaughter, and then the rest of it's just some stories, and then Michael's website as well.
Do you know if he spent time in Changi in Singapore? Changi, the prisoner of war camp?
I believe so. He was there till October 1942, and then he was on one of the hell ships over Tahiti. Yeah.
You know, there's a cartoonist called Ronald Searle, and he published a book which I have, which is called To the Kwai and Back. He was on the River Kwai group, and he drew cartoons and drawings throughout his time as a prisoner of war. It's really, and a lot of them in Changi prison.
Yeah,
as well.
Of course. I've seen some of the images that have, sort of thing. Yeah, but after the war, though, he came back. He was painter and decorator and had his own business, so he picked that back up again. He strongly told my 2 great uncles, who were both musicians, to get proper jobs, but they made a job of being musicians anyway. He ran a pub, and then he eventually passed in 1972 of tuberculosis in the end. But my mother always said he always had breathing difficulties, and that must have been from the mine here, I'd imagine. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
No worries. Thank you.
Okay, so can you introduce yourself and why are you here?
Yeah, certainly. So my name is Steve Vitta. I'm from Aberdeen in Scotland. I'm here because my grandfather, Jim Finlay, was a prisoner of war on Taiwan, and I wanted the opportunity to come and pay tribute to him and remember him at this very special Remembrance Day.
Wonderful. So when did you start finding out about his history?
So I was always aware that he had been a prisoner of war on Taiwan, but because he never spoke about it, you know, as a kid I asked him once, tell me about the war, Grandad, and I was told, you don't want to ask about the war. And it was very clear no. So I kind of left it at that, and then about 7 years ago my uncle, so his son, came here to make the same visit, got in touch with Michael from the society and passed on a little bit of information, and that just got me wanting to find out more and more and more. And then I got in touch with Michael myself, bought his book, got more and more information, and I just felt really that I wanted to come here and find it out.
So was he captured on Singapore?
He was captured in Singapore, yeah. He was held in the River Valley camp in Singapore for a period of time, and then he was transported on the Dainichi Maru hell ship. He was in Taichu camp for about 1 year. He was then transferred to Kinkaseki in November 1943. Then in June 45 he went to Kukutsu, obviously, and then stayed there until the end of the war.
And so So he was repatriated, and what did he do after the war?
So he was repatriated on the USS Block Island to Manila and then home on the Empress of Australia. After the war, he married his then girlfriend, who became my granny, and he worked as an engineer. So he was in the Royal Engineers. He went back to what he knew, which was engineering, and he became an engineer and brought up five children, and really just became a simple, working man for the rest of his life, as he had been before.
Right, absolutely. The greatest generation, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed.